the cry no one heard, except him. The streets were quiet that night. Cold wind blew through the narrow alleys of the city, carrying pieces of paper and dust with it. People walked fast, heads down, wrapped in thick coats. No one had time to stop. No one wanted to look around. Everyone was too busy, too tired, too cold. But in the corner of a dark street near an old trash bin sat someone no one noticed. A girl, not a human girl. Her skin was pale blue. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly in the dark. Her hair was tangled and her arms were thin like sticks. She wore nothing but a dirty cloth around her shoulders. Her knees were pressed to her chest. Her belly made small growling sounds. But it was her face that stopped hearts, wet with silent tears, lips trembling, too weak to speak. She had been crying for hours. People passed by. They looked once, and then quickly looked away. Some thought she was a street performer. Others thought she was someone else's problem. A few felt a little sad, but kept walking. They had their own worries, and so the little alien girl sat there, alone, freezing, starving, until he came. His name was Daniel. Just a simple man, a quiet one. He worked at a small repair shop, lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment. He didn't talk much. People often said he was strange, or maybe too serious. But Daniel had a habit. He noticed things others didn't. That night, he had finished work late. His hands were dirty with grease and his feet ached. He just wanted to go home, drink tea and sleep. But as he turned the corner, he heard it. A sound. Soft. Barely there. A broken cry. He stopped. It wasn't a baby. It wasn't a cat. It was something different. Something hurting. He followed the sound, slowly stepping closer to the trash bins. And then he saw her. At first, he thought she was a lost child in costume, maybe a prank. But then she looked up at him. Her eyes, those deep, glowing alien eyes, held something he couldn't describe. Pain, fear, hopelessness. She didn't speak. She didn't run. She just looked at him. Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. He knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. He tried again, this time slower. "Hungry?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. She simply nodded. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her. She flinched like she was scared of being hit. But when he didn't hurt her, she slowly leaned into the warmth. Daniel looked around. People kept walking. No one even cared. He stood up and held out his hand. "Come with me." She hesitated. Then slowly, with weak legs, she reached out and took his hand. Daniel didn't know what he was doing. He had no plan. He didn't even know if bringing her home was safe. But something inside him told him this girl needed help. Real help. And no one else was going to give it. Inside his apartment, he turned on the heater. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. He helped her sit on the couch, still wrapped in his jacket. Her tiny fingers clutched the fabric tightly. He brought her a cup of warm water. She drank it fast, too fast. He had to stop her before she choked. Then he made soup, simple vegetable soup. As the smell filled the room, she stared at the pot with wide eyes. When he placed the bowl in front of her, she looked at him like she couldn't believe it was real. She picked up the spoon and dropped it. Her hands were shaking. Daniel gently picked it up and held it for her. The first spoonful touched her lips and a single tear fell down her cheek. She wasn't just hungry. She was starving. He kept feeding her slowly, carefully. She ate like someone who thought it would all disappear if she took too long. When she finished, she leaned back and closed her eyes. She looked safe. For the first time, maybe in days. Daniel watched her. So many questions filled his mind. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she alone? And why did no one else care? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing. She wasn't going back to the street. Not tonight. Not ever. He stood up and whispered to himself, "You're safe now." She opened her eyes and smiled. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the old chair near the couch, watching the girl curl up under his thick blanket. Her breathing was slow now, calm, but her face still twitched sometimes, like she was fighting bad dreams. The soft glow from her skin had dimmed, almost like she was running out of power, like a small light about to go out. He had so many questions, but none of them mattered now. She was warm, fed, and safe. That was enough for tonight. In the morning, he made toast and eggs. The smell filled the small apartment. When the girl opened her eyes, she blinked like she didn't know where she was. Her body tensed, but when she saw Daniel standing by the stove offering her a plate, her shoulders relaxed just a little. She sat up slowly, keeping the blanket tightly around her, and stared at the food like it was treasure. He smiled gently. "Go on. It's all yours." She picked up the toast carefully. This time she didn't eat like she was afraid it would vanish. She chewed slowly, eyes half closed. After a few bites, she looked up at him. Her lips moved. A whisper. Daniel leaned in. "Did you say something?" She swallowed and tried again, voice barely there. "Faley." He blinked. "What?" "My name is Faley." Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected her to speak at all. Her voice was soft, shaky, like she hadn't used it in a long time. He nodded. "Faley, that's a pretty name." She looked down. Her fingers played with the edge of the blanket. Daniel didn't push her for more. Instead, he sat down across from her and smiled. "I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you, Faley." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. For a moment, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. She didn't trust him yet, not fully, but he had given her food, warmth, a name, and he hadn't hurt her. After breakfast, Daniel gave her a clean set of clothes. Old pajamas from a guest drawer. They were too big, but she didn't complain. She disappeared into the bathroom for a long time. He waited, unsure what she'd do. Run, lock the door and never come out? But finally she stepped out. Her blue skin was now clean, her hair wet and combed back. The bruises and cuts along her arms looked more clear in the light. So did the thin scars on her neck. He didn't ask about them. Instead, he said, "You look better." She gave him a tiny nod, then sat quietly on the couch, wrapping herself back in the blanket. Time passed slowly that day. Faley didn't speak much. She flinched at sudden noises, the beep of the microwave, the hum of a passing car. Every time someone walked past the hallway outside, she looked toward the door with wide, scared eyes. Daniel noticed it all. He offered her a tablet to draw or write, in case it was easier than talking. She drew circles, stars, a planet with 2 moons. Then slowly she wrote a word in a language Daniel didn't know. He tapped the screen. "What's this?" She hesitated, then said, "Home." Daniel paused. "Is that where you're from?" Faley looked out the window. The sky was gray, the clouds heavy. "It's gone," she whispered. Daniel didn't know what to say. He didn't know where home was. Another planet? A ship? A city that rejected her? She pulled the blanket tighter. "They took it. Burned it." Daniel felt a chill. "Who?" But she didn't answer. That night he gave her the bed and took the couch. She tried to argue, shaking her head, but he insisted. "You need it more." She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sheets like they were made of gold. "You're not a prisoner here," Daniel said gently. "You can stay as long as you want." Her lip quivered. "Why?" Daniel blinked. "Why, what? Why are you helping me?" He didn't have a big answer. No heroic speech. He just said, "Because no one else did." Faley didn't reply. She lay down slowly, head resting on the pillow. She kept staring at him for a long time like she was waiting for him to change, to show his true face. But he didn't. He just turned off the light and went to the couch, and in the dark he heard it. A soft voice, no longer shaking. "Thank you, Daniel." It was the first time she'd said his name. He smiled quietly to himself, even as tears filled his eyes. Daniel started to notice the little things first. The way Faley jumped at the sound of keys jingling. How she froze when the kettle whistled. How her eyes darted to the door every time footsteps passed in the hallway. At first he thought she was just nervous, but it was more than that. It was fear. Deep, trained fear. The kind that didn't come from one bad moment. It came from many, and it had been carved into her heart like a brand. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. But he observed. She avoided the windows during the day and stayed close to the wall, always sitting with her back to it. When he offered her food, she waited for him to take the first bite. When he offered clothes, she flinched before reaching out. When he raised his voice to answer a phone call, she shrank into herself, eyes wide, breathing fast. He started doing everything slower, quieter. Every drawer he closed gently. Every word he spoke, he softened. He moved around the apartment, like it was made of glass, not because he was scared, but because she was. And she didn't deserve more fear. She had clearly lived in it long enough. One afternoon, he caught her in the bathroom with the door open, staring into the mirror. She was tracing the scars on her shoulders with her fingers, gently, as if trying to remember how she got each one. When she saw him, she jumped and slammed the door. He didn't open it. He just said softly, "You don't need to hide from me, Faley." There was no reply. That night, while he was folding laundry, she sat beside him and asked a quiet question. "Do you think I'm broken?" The words crushed him. He looked at her carefully. "No," he said. "I think you're stronger than anyone I've ever met." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But maybe a small part of her wanted to. The next morning, he left a small music player on the table. It was an old device, simple. He loaded it with calm, soft songs, gentle piano, birds singing, the sound of rain. He didn't say anything, just placed it there. Hours later, she picked it up, and he smiled when he saw her, earphones in, swaying slowly to the soft notes. But the peace didn't last. It was a Sunday when someone knocked on the door. Just a normal knock, 3 taps. Daniel stood to answer, but before he could, Faley gasped and dove under the table, knocking over a cup. Her hands were shaking and she pressed them over her ears. Daniel quickly opened the door. It was just his neighbor, a woman asking about the building's heating. He spoke quickly and sent her away. When he turned back, Faley was still under the table, crying quietly. He knelt down beside her. "It's okay. She's gone." But Faley didn't answer. She was far away, lost in some memory, a place he couldn't see. He gently reached out and touched her shoulder. She flinched hard, but didn't pull away, she whispered. When they knocked like that, it meant punishment. Daniel's stomach turned. What kind of punishment? She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Sometimes they put us in the cold room. Sometimes they use the wire." He swallowed hard. "Who are they?" She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw something beyond fear in her eyes. Hate. "They took children from my planet. They trained us to serve, obey, not speak unless spoken to. The ones who failed, vanished. The ones who obeyed, survived." Daniel sat down beside her on the floor. The room was quiet, except for her soft breathing. "I don't know how I got away," she said, "but I ran and I ran until the street swallowed me." Daniel felt fire in his chest. Not at her, but at the monsters who had done this. Who had turned a little girl into a ghost, afraid of sounds and footsteps and kindness. "You don't have to run anymore," he said. "Not from me." She looked up again, her eyes full of tears. "Why do you care?" Because no one else did, he said again. She reached out this time, not for food, not for clothes, but for his hand. And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't flinch. Daniel had seen many broken things in his life. Broken machines, broken homes, even broken dreams. But nothing prepared him for the quiet storm that lived inside Feli. She moved like she didn't want to take up space. She spoke like her voice was borrowed. She smiled, but only for a second, like she feared someone would punish her for it. And when she thought no one was watching, her shoulders drooped in a way that said the world had been sitting on them for too long. That week, the weather turned cold again. The heater in Daniel's apartment struggled. One night, while folding blankets, he asked gently, "Do you want a hot shower?" Feli blinked. "Hot?" He nodded. "Yes, warm water, good for your muscles, and it'll help you sleep." She looked unsure but slowly nodded. He showed her how to turn the knobs, gave her a clean towel, and placed fresh clothes on the bathroom stool. Then he stepped out and gave her privacy. Minutes passed, then more. Daniel heard nothing from inside. He was about to check when the soft sound of water began. Relief washed over him, but it didn't last long. Not 10 minutes later, he heard a small cry. Then silence. Then the sound of the shower stopping. His hand hovered near the door. "Feli?" he called gently. No answer. Then the door creaked open. She stood there soaking wet. The towel clutched tightly around her shoulders, but she wasn't shaking from the cold. Her eyes were wide. Her lips trembled. She stepped closer, one slow step at a time, until she was standing right in front of him. And then, without saying a word, she turned around and dropped the towel. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Her back was a map of pain. Long, deep scars ran from her shoulders to her lower back. Some looked old and faded. Others were newer, red and angry. Some crisscrossed. Some formed strange patterns. But all of them screamed. The same thing. She had been tortured repeatedly. She didn't look back at him. She just stood there, letting him see what she had never shown anyone. It wasn't just trust. It was a cry for truth. Daniel took a careful step forward. "Who did this to you?" Her voice was low, flat. "The trainers." "Where?" "Underground, station, far from the city. They took girls, like me. They said we were property, that we were made to serve others." Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. Did no one stop them? No one cared. Not on my planet, and not here. Daniel gently picked up the towel and wrapped it around her again. She let him. Her hands gripped the edge of the fabric, holding it like armor. "I'm not a servant," she whispered. "I'm not an object." "No," Daniel said firmly. "You're not, you never were." She turned to face him, tears mixing with water on her cheeks. "Then why do I feel like one?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He didn't have magic words, but he reached out and placed his hand over hers. "Because no one showed you the truth. But I will." She looked at him then. Really looked. Her glowing eyes met his, searching, testing. And slowly, for the first time, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Daniel froze. She wasn't hugging him. She was surrendering, for just a moment, to peace. That night, she slept deeply for the first time. No nightmares, no cries, just silence and the soft rise and fall of her breathing. Daniel sat on the couch staring at the ceiling. The image of her back haunted him. Each scar told a story, a chapter in a nightmare she had survived. Alone, but not anymore. He picked up his old laptop and began searching. News archives, missing persons, alien trafficking reports, underground groups, anything that could match what she had told him. He found something, a small article from 2 years ago, a police raid at an abandoned cargo station, several alien children rescued, some missing, others too sick to speak. The organization behind it was never caught. The case had gone cold, but one name stood out. Subject 47, unidentified minor, blue-skinned, female, escaped before recovery. Daniel stared at the screen. That had to be her. He closed the laptop gently and looked toward the bedroom door. She was safe now, but if someone was still looking for her, then the real danger hadn't even started. The morning began like any other. A quiet chill hung in the air and sunlight peeked softly through the curtains. Faley was in the kitchen, standing awkwardly in oversized slippers, trying to learn how to make toast. Daniel watched from the hallway, hiding a smile. She was learning little by little. Just yesterday she asked what a spoonful of sugar meant. Today she was trying to butter her bread without tearing it. Progress. But the moment didn't last long. A knock came at the door, firm, sharp, 3 times in a row. Faley froze. The butter knife slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor. Daniel's smile vanished. His heart skipped a beat. Something about that knock. It wasn't normal. It wasn't friendly. It sounded like authority. He walked slowly to the door and peeked through the tiny eye hole. 3 men stood outside, not police, not neighbors. Uniforms, dark gray, tall, no visible weapons, but they didn't need them. Their faces showed control, confidence, and silence. Daniel opened the door a few inches, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" One of the men spoke. "We're conducting a routine search. Recent reports say a non-registered extraplanetary miner has been seen in this area." Daniel's throat tightened. "I haven't seen anything." The man's eyes didn't blink. "We'd like to confirm that. May we come in?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Inside, he could hear Faley breathing fast. She was behind the wall, hidden but not safe. She had gone pale. The man at the door continued. "Sir, failure to cooperate will raise suspicion." Daniel looked at the man. Then calmly he said, "You'll need a warrant." A pause. The man smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. "We'll be back." As they turned and walked away, Daniel locked the door and ran to Faley. She was pressed against the wall, sliding down slowly, hands gripping her arms. "They found me," she whispered. "No," Daniel said. "Not yet. They'll come back." "Yes," he admitted. "But we won't be here when they do." They had to move fast. Daniel grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with essentials, clothes, food, cash. Faley stood silently, trembling, trying to help but dropping everything she touched. Her hands couldn't stop shaking. "Where will we go?" she asked. Daniel paused. "I know someone, an old friend who helps people. People like you." Faley looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to do this." Daniel zipped the bag. "Yes, I do." By evening, they slipped out the back entrance of the building. The streets were busier now, good, easier to blend in. Faley kept her hood up, her head low. Every time she heard a siren, she flinched. Daniel kept her close, walking fast, but not suspiciously. They reached the train station, not a fancy one, the old underground line, mostly used by workers, sometimes by people who didn't want to be seen. As they waited for the train, Faley spoke again. "Those men, they weren't police." "No," Daniel said. "They weren't. They worked for the ones who hurt me." Daniel didn't answer, but she saw it in his face. He knew. The train ride was long and silent. They got off near the edge of the city, where broken buildings stood beside dark alleys and flickering streetlights. They walked for several blocks before stopping in front of a small rusted door with faded paint. Daniel knocked 5 times, an old code. A slot opened. 2 tired eyes looked out. Then the door unlocked. A tall woman stood there, her hair gray and wild. She wore a tool belt and smelled of engine oil. "Took you long enough," she grunted. "Get in." Faley stepped in carefully, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room. The place looked like a repair shop, but in the back were hidden beds, emergency supplies, and strange tech she didn't recognize. "This is Marla," Daniel said. "She helps people disappear." Marla looked Feely up and down. Alien kid? Huh? Feely didn't answer. She's scared, Daniel said. She should be. Feely lowered her head. But then Marla surprised them. She walked over, knelt down, and placed a warm hand on Feely's shoulder. You're not the first, and you won't be the last, but you made it here. That means something. Feely finally looked up, and in Marla's rough, tired eyes she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Safety. That night, Feely sat by a small fire in the hidden back room. Daniel handed her a cup of hot tea. She held it carefully. They're not going to stop, are they? Daniel shook his head. No, but we won't either. She stared at the fire. Why me? Daniel looked at her. Because sometimes, the ones they hurt most are the ones who matter most. And for the first time since they ran, Feely didn't look afraid. She looked ready. The next few days felt like a blur. Feely and Daniel never stayed in one place for long. Marla, with her rough voice and kind heart, gave them a temporary place to rest. But even she knew the truth. Those men in gray were not regular agents. They had no badges, no paperwork, no rules. And if they wanted Feely badly enough, they'd tear the city apart to find her. That's why Marla made the call, and that's why, just after midnight, they found themselves standing at the mouth of an old subway tunnel, long sealed off and forgotten by most of the world. Daniel wore a backpack filled with supplies. Feely wore his spare coat, 2 sizes too big. Marla handed them a flashlight and a folded map. Follow the blue markers on the wall, she said. They'll guide you to the outer zone. There's a safe house hidden past the ruins. Someone will meet you there. Will it be safe? Daniel asked. For a while, Marla answered. But this isn't about safety anymore. It's about staying ahead. Feely looked down the tunnel. Cold air rushed up from the darkness. It smelled of rust, dirt, and something else, something old. Is it dangerous? She asked quietly. Marla snorted. Everything's dangerous, kid, but the real danger's behind you, not down there. Daniel gave Marla a firm nod, then turned to Feely. Stay close. Don't stop unless I say. Feely nodded, and together they stepped into the tunnel. The darkness swallowed them whole. The underground was a world of echoes and shadows. There, footsteps bounced off the walls, mixed with the distant drip of water and the occasional squeak of rats. Feely clung to Daniel's side, holding the edge of his coat tightly. Every time the flashlight flickered, her heart jumped. But she didn't complain. She was tired of fear. She wanted to move forward, even if the path was cold and wet and silent. They walked for hours. Blue arrows, hand-painted long ago, marked their way. Sometimes they passed broken trains covered in vines and dust. Sometimes they saw signs of others, blankets, cans, small fires long gone cold. This place had held many fugitives over the years. At one point, Feely whispered, "Why are they chasing me?" Daniel looked at her, walking in silence for a few seconds before answering. Because you're living proof of what they tried to erase, she frowned. What does that mean? He stopped and knelt down beside her. You escaped them. You survived. If others see you, see that you're free, they might start asking questions. That scares them. Feely looked down. I'm just a girl. You're more than that, Daniel said. You're a light they couldn't put out. She didn't know how to respond. But deep inside her, something small flickered. Something like hope. By the time they reached the halfway point, the tunnel split into 2. The blue marker pointed left. Daniel turned that way, but suddenly stopped. He pulled Feely behind a pillar and covered the flashlight with his hand. Voices, faint, but growing louder. Boots crunching against gravel. Not from behind, from ahead. Daniel's heart pounded. They had been followed. He turned to Feely and whispered, We have to run. They moved quickly but quietly, slipping through a maintenance hatch on the right side of the tunnel. Inside was a narrow path, barely wide enough for two people. Pipes ran along the wall. The space smelled like oil and metal. Daniel used the flashlight in short bursts, just enough to guide them. Behind them, voices echoed into the main tunnel. Search. Teams. Not police, not rescue. Hunters. Feely's breath came fast. She tried to stay calm, but her legs were shaking. Still, she didn't stop. She kept running. The passage twisted and turned. At one point, it dipped into a crawl space. Daniel went first, then helped pull her through. Just as they reached the end of the crawl tunnel, they heard a voice shouting behind them. There, this way. Daniel grabbed Feely's hand and ran. They burst out into a wide chamber, an old station, long abandoned, covered in moss and cracked tiles. At the far end was a steel door with faded red letters. Feely gasped. That's it? The safe house? I hope so, Daniel shouted, footsteps behind them. Fast, closer. Daniel pulled her forward. The door was locked, but there was a keypad. He pulled out the paper Marla gave him. The code was scribbled in a corner. His fingers shook as he typed it in. Beep, 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 click. The door opened. They slipped inside just as the enemy voices echoed into the station. Daniel slammed the door shut and locked it. Silence. They stood in a narrow, dim hallway, lined with crates and emergency lights. A small console on the wall flickered to life. A robotic voice spoke. Welcome to Haven Point. Feely collapsed against the wall, panting. Daniel sat beside her, catching his breath. For the first time in days, they were one step ahead. The safe house was unlike anything Feely had ever seen. Clean, silent, and warm. Small lights glowed along the walls. Screens flickered with maps, signals, and strange alien languages she hadn't seen since she was taken. The air smelled like old metal and oil, but it was safe. Truly safe. For the first time since she arrived on Earth, no one was chasing her. No one was watching her with cold eyes. No one was hurting her. Daniel led her to a couch and sat beside her, still catching his breath. They had made it. For now. Soon, an older woman with silver skin and dark robes entered the room. Her steps were calm, her voice soft. You're the girl who escaped. Feely tensed, but Daniel nodded. This is Feely. She's been through more than anyone should. The woman nodded. We've heard whispers for years. A child taken from the royal line. Vanished. Assumed dead. Now, here you are. Daniel looked confused. Royal line. Feely's hands trembled. I don't know what that means. The woman stepped closer. Do you remember your full name? Feely hesitated, then whispered, Falira of Telnarai. The woman's eyes widened. That name hasn't been spoken in decades. Daniel blinked. What does it mean? The woman looked at them both. She is not just a survivor. She is the last known daughter of the Telnarai throne. Her mother was the queen of the peaceful alliance worlds, before the war, before the fall. Feely shook her head slowly. My mother is dead? The woman nodded gently. Yes, she was captured and killed. Many of your people were, but you, your bloodline, was a symbol of unity. That's why they took you. They wanted to erase hope itself. Daniel stared at Feely. You're a princess? Feely's voice was small. I didn't know, I was just a child. The woman knelt beside her. You still are. But your existence changes everything. Daniel stood. Then we have to keep her hidden. They'll come again. No, the woman said firmly. We don't hide anymore. Word of her survival will spread. Worlds that feared rebellion will now have a reason to stand. But she's just a girl, Daniel argued. She's more than that, the woman replied. She's a symbol, a living reminder that the enemy couldn't silence every voice. Feely sat quietly, lost in thought. Her fingers touched the scars on her arm. What if I'm not strong enough? Daniel sat beside her again, looking into her eyes. You are. You're the strongest person I know. You survived everything they did. And you still kept your heart. She looked at him, tears rising. I'm afraid. He nodded. Me too. But you're not alone anymore. For a moment, there was only silence between them. Then the woman stood and gestured toward a small room. Rest. There's time yet. When you wake, we'll talk about the future. Faley walked slowly to the room. Daniel watched her, proud and worried at the same time. When the door closed, the woman turned to him. You did more than save her, she said. You changed the future. Daniel shook his head. I didn't do anything special. You did what no one else would. You stopped, you listened, you cared. He smiled faintly. That's just being human. The woman smiled back. Then, humanity may be more powerful than we thought. The next morning, the council gathered. Faley stood before them in clean clothes, her scars still visible but no longer hidden. She spoke slowly, but with growing strength. She told them what she remembered, what she had seen and how she survived. The room listened in silence. No one interrupted. When she finished, one of the elders stood. Do you understand who you are now? Faley nodded. Yes, but I don't want to rule. I want to help. I want to make sure no child is ever taken again. The council agreed. From that day on, the message spread across stars. The lost heir had survived. Refugees, rebels, and silent watchers who had given up hope began to rise again, not for war, but for change. Weeks passed. Faley and Daniel stayed close. She still had nightmares, still flinched sometimes, but she also smiled more. She laughed. She asked questions. She learned about earth food and danced to silly music. She was healing. One night she sat beside Daniel and whispered, If you hadn't stopped that day, he looked at her. Don't think about it. I do. Every day. And I'm glad you did. He smiled. Me too. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Promise you won't leave? I'm not going anywhere. And in the silence that followed, she finally believed it. Not just that she was safe, but that she was loved.